Hey, folks online, we're going to get started in just a minute here. Okay, everybody, thanks for your patience. Hi, thank you for being here with us today. My name is Laura Swanzarek, Executive Director at Tacoma on the Go. We are the nonprofit advocate and resource for all things transportation in the greater Tacoma area. Really excited to offer these forums in a hybrid format. So thank you to everyone in the room with us, and thank you to everybody attending on Zoom. For our 2026 Friday Forum series, we are exploring different ways that we can increase connection in our communities through discussion on policy, mobility, and how leaders can work together across jurisdictions. Today, we are digging into transit-oriented development. There will be a Q&A section at the end of the forum. For folks in the room, you should have gotten some paper, or you can get a piece from Timothy at the door. We'll collect those towards the end of the forum. Folks on Zoom, you can use the Q&A function at any time during the forum to submit your questions, and I'll give you guys a reminder too. And with that, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Tanisha Jumper. Tanisha is the Chief Communications Officer at Tacoma Public Schools, and we're so glad that she's here. Thanks.
Hello, happy Black History Month. Last working day of Black History Month, had to represent, and glad to be here with you today. Today's conversation is one actually, a lot of the times we're repeating conversations, and transit-oriented development has come up before, but we've never really talked about what it is, what the impact on the community is. There's a lot of feelings about it. There's people who are very concerned that how does this change a community? If I've been living there and I can afford it, will transit-oriented development price me out? There's people who have homes in those areas and they're like, what is this going to do to my home value? And so we've assembled a really very cool panel. Happens to be a lot of my very good friends, and I'm excited about that. Hopefully we won't do like the, Eddie Murphy or Arsenio Hall, if you're old enough to know what I'm talking about, thing where we like start having our own private conversation. I'll try really hard not to do that. But I'm really excited about this conversation today. And as always, we never have enough time. So it's going to go really, really fast. So if get some paper, write your questions down. We're going to try to get to as many questions as we can at the end of this. And so with that, I'm going to kick it off, and I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves, because I could say lots of great things about them, but I'm going to let them brag on themselves, and then I'll sprinkle my brags throughout the whole day. Okay, so let's start with you, Matthew.
Good afternoon. My name is Matthew Mateo, and I am with Sound Transit's Office of Planning and Development. I am part of the team within Sound Transit that helps implement the agency's transit-oriented development program. Thanks for being here today.
Jasmyn.
Good afternoon now. I'm Jasmyn Jefferson, a real estate designated broker, and I own a small brokerage here in Pierce County. And I sit right where all of these topics intersect as far as the consumer goes. So I'm here to talk from my perspective of working with people who may be affected, who may be excited, not excited. What does this mean? How do they talk about property values? So thank you for having me.
She's being modest. She does a lot more than that, but we'll get to that later. Kiara.
See?
Yeah.
Perfect. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kiara Daniels. I get to kind of wear a few of my hats today, which is amazing. I am formerly the Deputy Mayor of Tacoma.
Round of applause for that.
But I'm not anymore. I am now a developer. So I get to do some of this work. So that's the other hat that I get to bring with me today. And then also I'll be wearing my resident Hilltop Native hat. So the displacement side and fear and all of that too. So
Yeah, so let's jump right in. Mateo, this is your chance to be a school teacher. Okay, so Matthew's name is Matthew Mateo. I always call my friend Matthew Mateo. So I'm gonna get confused. So it's his fault for having Matthew as his name. Or Mateo, because so Matthew. Why don't you give us a little bit of education on what is transit-oriented development, just so we all are coming from the same perspective.
Thank you for clarifying my name. Yes, it is the same thing twice. I was just telling Jasmyn I should have given my mom in Guam the link to this so she can see what her choices have caused my life many years later. But yes, I go by Matthew and Mateo. Clearly, it's the same thing twice. But I'm very excited to be here and talk TOD with all of you. So transit-oriented development is distinct from regular real estate development because it centers transit within a community. Ideally, that transit is reliable, it is frequent, it is high capacity, and I would say most days our link light rail system is that. From that transit, TOD really asks the question, the acronym is TOD, apologies. So you'll hear me say that a lot throughout throughout this talk. TOD really asks the question from the transit station, are the things that you as a passenger, as a resident of the community, as a visitor to the area that the transit station in, are the things that you need, want, or expect within a reasonable walking distance of that transit station. At Sound Transit, we prioritize building homes near our transit station. We do this because homes are oftentimes the greatest need within the station area. To date, Sound Transit has built or have in progress close to 4,000 homes across 14 different stations throughout the Link Light Rail system. Almost all of these are affordable homes. That means they are serving residents who are earning 80% area median income or below. And we do that because we are mandated by the voters and our board of directors to deliver homes in our station areas. Within those homes, they typically reside in what is called a mixed-use development. And so that's a building or buildings that have residential on the upper floors and ground floor commercial at the street level. The ground floor commercial could be anything from a coffee shop, a medical office, a community space, anything that can contribute to the vibrancy of the neighborhood. You know, that's the ideal, is a walkable, mixed use, mixed income area around our station where your day-to-day things are within a reasonable walking distance of a high capacity station. And so we can do this because we utilize surplus land through the construction of light rail infrastructure to build TOD. I'll go into what surplus land is. For the past many years, the most visible part of Sound Transit in the region has been the construction of extensions. That's extensions out to Linwood, extensions out to the east side, and most recently, as of December, to Federal Way downtown. Part of building light rail involves taking land for construction and operation of the light rail system. That land is used for the stations themselves. It's used for the tracks and the guideways that allow the trains to run between stations and destinations. But part of that land is also used just for the period of time that the system is under construction. That land is used to support construction equipment, construction materials, anything that's needed to actually build the system. Once the system is done, once the construction is done, that land that is used just for the purpose of construction can potentially be surplused because it's no longer needed for the transit operations and the function of operating a light rail system that itself. And that's the land that we target for TOD. I'll use an example in Federal Way because that's the one I'm most familiar with. Directly adjacent to the Federal Way Federal Way downtown station, there's approximately 6 acres of land with 4 blocks on there that are targeted for transit-oriented development. Sound Transit, the voters approved Sound Transit 3 in 2016. That area has been under construction for a long time. It opened in the first week of December, I believe, is when the Federal Way link extension opened. And in that time period, concurrent with constructing the system, we, within the TOD team, were working with the community, with the city, and with partners to help realize what development could look like in that area. And so we worked directly with our city partners and everyone that could help vision what that area could be as a TOD development. And also in the first week of December, our board awarded 2 of the 4 sites to a team comprised of Multi-Service Center, which is a group based in Federal Way that constructs and operates and provides services, including housing in Federal Way, and Shelter Resources Inc., who is a developer of affordable housing in the area. And so that's one example of how we take surplus land that's used for construction to realize transit-oriented development along our system. And I can go into detail about many others if you want to.
So I have 2 questions, but I'm gonna ask Kiara. So from both with your former city hat on and your developer hat, like, do these things just happen? Like, how do these things happen? Does the city decide where it's happening? Does the developer decide? Like, who gets to decide and who decides where? And then Matthew, you can jump in too.
Are you asking about where the development happens or where
Yes.
the transportation happens?
Where does the development happen? Because I think that sometimes communities feel like this is put upon them. And then there's other communities that are like, I want this so bad, and they don't get it. And I don't, most of the time in these conversations, we talk about how do regular community members get a say in, or are they showing up at the right meeting at the right time to have input? And so, how a lot of times these things are happening in our communities, and if you're not paying attention, you're like, it feels like it just happened, right? And nobody got invited to the party where it decided.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons that I got into government was realizing back in the day, I started organizing around community engagement and displacement around Hilltop, and that's kind of what made me want to be passionate about being in government. What I become to understand in that work is that there's a plan for a plan for a plan for a plan, and
Are we talking about comp plans now?
yes. Oh, there's a comprehensive plan that kind of organizes our entire neighborhood, and there is community engagement that happens in that. And I can remember the feeling like, well, who made this comprehensive plan? It doesn't feel very comprehensive to me. Were the people involved in that?
Yeah. So the side note to a comprehensive plan, for those that don't know, is comprehensive plan is made about 25 years before the development actually happens. So there was community engagement, but it was not the community that was there currently. So I got to work on the South Tacoma neighborhood plan, comprehensive plan. And there was a lot of people in the room that were like 60 in their 60s because they were the homeowners in the neighborhood. And when they realized this plan's not going to be enacted for 25 to 50 years, there were a lot of people that were kind of angry about that. So I just think it's important to know, like, in something like a comprehensive plan that's driving where single family homes are going to be, where's apartments going to be, where's development's happening, those things are happening so far out so that the city has an opportunity to look for grants, look for opportunities, align funding to different things. But what is missed is the person who's currently in the space right now?
That's exactly what I'm so glad you came in with that because I wasn't sure how to really explain all of that. So it's a combination of all of these entities and people that created. And what I would say is missing from that conversation is just that every 5 years, you can kind of see different trends in a neighborhood. And there is no way, it doesn't matter. They could have had everybody in the community in that conversation 25 years ago. And I don't think that they would have been able to predict, unless they were really paying attention to cities like Oakland and the Central District and other places, what would happen. And I think that back then, displacement, I don't know if it was really, gentrification was like, that was just coming on the scene back then. And so I don't know that there is really an honest way to have mitigated it back then. But what I will say is there's been so much work done, particularly in the Hilltop community now, and it's like we're still 10 years behind the ball, and it takes, just because you want to mitigate something doesn't mean that it's going to be done. It's got to be a lot of money and a lot of entities coming together at the same time. And just to kind of catch up to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. So Jasmyn, I want to bring you in here because I think, so a lot of you have heard me talk about it before. I left here in 1992 to go to college. And I came back in 2015 to come work for the city. And I went on a tour, and they were taking me on a tour of like all the projects the city was working on. And we're driving, and I'm like, Cushman, wait, where are we at? And they're like, oh, you're on Hilltop. And I was like, no, we're not. Because it didn't look like the Hilltop that I left here in 1992. And so I think for people who are trying to move into a neighborhood, people who are choosing to move out of neighborhoods, like, can you talk a little bit about those trends? And we've talked about before in these forums, like people who are really like very concerned of like this thing, like you're bringing in this light rail, you're going to bring in these apartments. We've been this like tight knit neighborhood of things, and this is going to make my property taxes go way up, or this is going to make I'm going to lose value in my home because you're bringing in apartments that are catering to people who are maybe lower income. So like, can you talk about a little bit about what that looks like from the point of view of a broker realtor? Okay.
Yeah, so I am from Tacoma, born and raised. I was also actually grew up on Hilltop, so 92, I was in it. You know, from a personal perspective, and then also seeing what has taken place, obviously the landscape has changed tremendously. People are looking for affordable housing, and then they say safe housing, and that's everybody. But something that's not talked about a lot is why some people move out of neighborhoods has to do with schools. And so they move from being a homeowner, become a renter somewhere else. And so there's a lot of different nuances that come to the reason. Somebody asked me a couple years ago, well, all the Black people left Hilltop and they moved to these other areas. Well, if you look at those trends, it has to do with schools. And so now trying to figure out reasons for people to come back to the neighborhood. One of my passions is come back to Tacoma. There's so much in Tacoma. Come back from Spanaway, Puyallup, and all those other places. So there's a lot of different things happening. Kiara hit it on the head. Did you say 15 years? There were 5 or 15 years?
I said 5, but
It's somewhere in between 5 and 15 years that you have a cycle of homeowners moving in and out of neighborhoods. So they'll come into a neighborhood, they'll live there for a little while, they'll make changes, they'll have an opinion about things. But when you get into the long-term discussions, you know, you really have to be very forward thinking, have projections, numbers of like how many people are projected to move into the area and what does that demographic look like? What is the age of those people? So I see it from a very non-governmental lens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the real, like there is the policy part, but if you've read a comprehensive plan, raise your hand.
No.
Okay. Wow. I worked at the city, and if I asked that question, not that many hands would come up. I don't work there anymore, so I can't speak for them. But I'm just saying, not many people have read a comprehensive plan. So clearly you guys are tuned in. But what I'm saying is like, that is not a normal thing that people are like tuned into. And so if that's where the plan for your neighborhood is at, then you don't know that they were planning to work with Sound Transit or any other. I mean, Sound Transit's not the only, or I'm right about that, right? Sound Transit's not the only organization that does transit-oriented development. So when you think about that, like somebody might have wanted that, but then, you know, you fast forward 10 years and now there's a different group of people.
Right, 25, if we're talking 25 years, that's probably 2 additional households that have lived in that particular location. And the thought behind why to do these things has moved twice and onto something else.
Yeah, I mean, I could just say that in terms of like, when I came back, the realtor was like, oh, there's all these beautiful houses in Spanaway. Well, when I left in 1992, not very many people lived in Spanaway, and certainly not people that looked like me. Like that was not safe. That was not a safe place or a place that I was like, oh yeah, let's go. I was like, heck no, I'm in Tacoma or Lakewood because that's what I knew. And then I came back and all of these places were so different. And so like when you think about how long, and I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, Matthew, but like how long is a project kind of in development before the first piece of ground is moved?
I can speak to Federal Way because that's the project I'm most familiar with. And again, these are 2 of the 4 TOD sites. I think the Sound Transit started acquiring properties in 2019, 2020. Construction started in early 2022, I believe. And then they just opened in December of 2026. So you have that time period of station construction, and then we are bringing on a development team that I just mentioned, MSC and SRI, and they're going to go through permitting for a year and a half, probably, lining up funding sources. And so conservatively, the first shovel is not going to hit the ground until 2028, let's say, on a project like that. So at least a year and a half from the moment the site is awarded to a developer, and then a number of years preceding that leading to selecting a developer.
Mm-hmm. All right. Anybody want to add anything? Okay. So TOD is often large capital transit project, which brings gentrification, which we've talked a little bit about. What work is being done to minimize or mitigate gentrification displacement? And is there any evidence that it's working? And I'm going to start with Kiara, and then I'm going to go to Jasmyn on this one.
So putting on my former city hat, one of the things that we try to do as policymakers, or what I try to do as a policymaker, was one of the most difficult things is to try to balance investment and into the things that you want to see, but remembering, which sometimes policymakers forget, is that we can't force the private market to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times we feel like we have done the work because we have created an amazing policy that says, yes, the environment is going to be protected. Yes, people are going to be here and we're going to have the best, brightest, most affordable building. But we haven't spoken to anybody that's creating those things. And we don't know the cost drivers to create those things. And so, you know, we have tools that we can use to like kind of tamper down certain things. So we have multifamily development exemptions or tax exemptions, right? And they are used to create more and big and better buildings. They're used to create more density. And we can use those things to create affordability by pulling levers on them. So maybe we ask for a percentage of the building. If we give you 8 or 20 years of tax relief, we need a certain amount of those units to be affordable. And so as a policymaker, that's how we help to incentivize building the things that we want to see. The problem with that is that sometimes we make those levers and we don't consider who's building the thing, and we kind of just make them on vibes. Like, oh, it would be good. It would be, I like this building. Well, it feels good. 20%, maybe 50. Right. Just make them all. Just 100%. We'll give you 100%. You kind of do a deal and you kind of negotiate on your own about what feels sense, and you're not looking at the market and like what it actually costs to make that happen. And that's kind of the unfortunate part is like, well, we can make a policy that works, except sometimes you just don't even see anything get built. And that's really the worst case scenario, is that we have a policy that says that we are going to be affordable and that we cured displacement and that we've mitigated, but we actually haven't created the density that creates the walkable neighborhood, because there's nobody there walking the neighborhood because we haven't created the thing.
Right, right, right.
So that's a really long way to.
No, it's a real thing. And it's also like, you know, one of the things that like, you know, sitting in the chamber, it'd be like, affordable to who? Like sometimes what is affordable based on percentages and numbers and area median income, it doesn't feel real to a person who's, I just want a 1-bedroom apartment, or I have kids and the only thing on the market is a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, you know, 500 square feet. And if any of you have kids, you don't want to be in a building, in a room with 500 square feet with a kid, right? Like I love them, but I want them to be over there. So, so I think that that's like a real, you know, very like, it's kind of like the best laid plans kind of thing, you know, like you had a plan for it, but then the reality of how that works out, you know, isn't necessarily how we want it. Jasmyn, you know, I know you work with different realty groups and some other projects. Like what are some other things that are being done to try to mitigate gentrification and the lack of affordability in this area?
So something that I'm very proud of that Tacoma stepped up to participate in is the Black Home Initiative. It's been around for about 7 years. It's a network of nonprofit, for-profit developers who come together to look at these things. What is missing in the conversation? Propping up developers, bringing in capital so that developers who are okay to take less to build in the communities. And right now, Kiara has a development. She has, is it ribbon cut or broken ground? There's 2 phases.
Broken ground.
Broken ground. We'll get to ribbon cutting. But her story of bringing affordable houses back to her community is exactly what Black homeownership is supposed to do. Another thing that's really spectacular that the state of Washington has done in conjunction with the Black homeownership or Black Home Initiative is the Covenant Home Program. And that provides up to 20% down payment. So if you take somebody who maybe has been priced out of Hilltop and they want to be in Hilltop, and now they can pay the 20% and they can compete with other conventional buyers, they're now able to buy back into those neighborhoods. And so you're seeing actually Black Home Initiative is Pierce, King, Thurston, and going into Snohomish County. Pierce County is closing the most Covenant home loans because Pierce County still has price points that people can supposedly afford, but it's the closest thing. And what you're seeing is a lot of people who lived in Spanaway, Puyallup, University Place that were renters are coming back to the South End, whether it be Hilltop, Central Tacoma, and even North Tacoma. So it's a pretty cool thing. So when you look at gentrification, we don't go into these meetings and talk about how do we fight, beat, and defeat gentrification. We talk about how do we bring affordable housing for the people who want to be in the neighborhoods to either stay there, who want to grow up there, or, you know, build their families or come back.
So, Matthew, you talked about those businesses that are in these developments. And I know one of the things I heard when I first came back to Tacoma where people were like, well, who in Hilltop can afford a $15 bagel? Like there was like new things were coming in. And I think that's the tension. Like people want access to nice things, but also if you're just barely hanging on because the cost of housing and living here is going up and up and up, then you can't afford the thing. And then either it doesn't last because you don't have the consumer base to support it, or you get priced out and new people come in. And now there's a new group of people getting to enjoy the benefits of things other people have worked really hard to try to bring to their neighborhood. So like when you guys go about, I don't know if you guys actually select or if you just set the groundwork and then someone else selects what businesses come when and all that. So maybe talk about that a little bit.
We typically work with the cities and community organizations to prioritize community representation within Sound Transit's TOD developments. I want to add on to Kiara's excellent point about understanding what will actually be built in the neighborhoods that you're trying to target. At Sound Transit, and also to the tools that you mentioned available. One of the biggest tools that Sound Transit has to realize affordable housing development was part of the Sound Transit 3 voting package, and that allows Sound Transit to discount land for affordable housing development. That means that for a developer who's the state statute says qualified entity, a qualified entity, which is a nonprofit, a local government, an entity that commits to building affordable housing that's less than an 80% area median income or below. The board of directors of Sound Transit has the authority to discount that land to zero, which means that on a project that can cost tens of millions of dollars, the fair market value of that land next to a transit station could be a significant portion of that, which could make the difference between a project penciling or not financially. So that's one of the tools I think that's unique to Sound Transit. Specific to affordable housing as well, we also partner with the Washington State Housing Finance Commission on prioritizing Sound Transit projects for bond caps through the low-income housing tax credit program, which again, which goes to Kiara's point about understanding who's going to build it, what's the friction from in the development that's going to happen, and how can we address those pain points towards doing what the policy is intended to do. And then specific to the retail question, and retail is very difficult. I am not a retail expert at all, but from what I am hearing from the development community, development right now, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this in your markets that you work in, development's hard. This is a very challenging time to be building things. And having something like retail requires a lot of intention and an understanding of how not only that retail business will be constructed, but also how it will operate. And it's consistently a challenge, but it's something that we really do try to make it a central part of what we do. But there's no good answer. It's very difficult to make good retail and good ground floor activation work.
I am so glad you brought that up because there's some people in here that I know of over the years have been working in retail and retail development, and it's particularly in the downtown Tacoma. And one of the things that another thing I used to do back in the day, when I was working in housing, I realized that people didn't just care that their houses were coming missing from neighborhoods. They cared about their favorite shops going. And that's one of the sneaky signs that we see of displacement, because it happens over 15, 20 years, is your favorite shop goes missing and nobody really says anything. And it's kind of sad for the moment. And then we kind of move on and we don't think about it as this larger contributor to what's going on. And one of the things that we've been able to do in the Hilltop, and it was a lot of different entities coming together, was a program called SpaceWorks, is a program called SpaceWorks, through Chase Bank, through Downtown Tacoma Partnership, helping some board members. God, there were so many different entities coming together to try to figure out how do we not only help subsidize units for people to live, but subsidize and create spaces for underserved businesses to be in the neighborhood. So if it's businesses that either are there to stay there, or businesses like folks that maybe were from the community to come back and start a business in those locations. And what I would say we found out in that work is that there's a lot of barriers, but I feel like there's some really transformational work to figure out in the design. How do you make it work? Does it pencil? And then what's needed to make it pencil for the end user at the end? And that's the part that's not really quite figured out. Is we made these beautiful buildings and we, put some funds together for TIs, but Now we got to make sure that the businesses are prepared to be in those spaces and that they're making enough money and they're healthy enough to be able to get $1 million loan for the rest of their TIs and for all of and to stay alive for the next 15, 20 years, right?
Yep.
So it's like,
TI is tenant improvement, right?
sorry, yeah,
Yep.
TIs are
Yep.
tenant
Making sure.
improvements. So it's like all of these people have to be working together, because if I'm not working with Jasmyn and I'm not working with Mateo, and then we don't have a JD, or we don't have all of these pieces coming together, something ends up missing, and what it looks like is a vacant space at the end, and we hate that.
Yeah. So I think, Jasmyn, I want to throw you this question. I think when we hear lots of rumors and lots of kind of conjecture of like what people are looking for, and like last month we talked about 15-minute kind of compact communities. Like when a person is coming in from either out of town or moving from one part of town to another, like what are some of the things that they are saying? Like, I want to be close to what I want to be, because I think, yeah, go ahead.
Work, groceries. So I've heard reports, I haven't, not in the last year or so, something like 60% of our residents travel outside of Pierce County for work. So when I meet people, they say, I need to be 30 minutes from work. And so I say, oh, you still want to live in Tacoma? Because with the traffic,
Right.
and they're like, no, I work in Auburn, or I work in Kent or Renton. So you want to live in Kent or Renton? And so that's the biggest question. So having the transportation, there are more people who are getting used to taking the light rails, and I don't know all the names of the vehicles. There's things on tracks in different places that take you to different places, okay?
Yeah.
That I will get on, but I don't know how, and Tanisha's helped me. But anyways, that's usually the biggest indicator. But then it's, where's the grocery store? Or if they have children still in the home, they're going to want to be at proximity to certain schools. Some people want to live close to the school, some people don't.
Yeah.
But it's usually a safe distance to the school, so that if they're walking to and from, they can do that. But then you have people who have aged and they're ready to be a little bit further away, but still have access. And so further away, which is so interesting to me, could be from University Place to downtown Tacoma, which, you know, when you hear further away, you're expecting outwards.
Yeah.
And they love the link, even if they don't use it. They like knowing that it's there in case they want to use it. Or when I go to resale, it's going to be worth something to whoever was going to buy this house or unit.
Nice. So does Sound Transit, or in those conversations you're in, do you guys talk about stuff like that? Like, you know, can you, I mean, right now it's not here yet. We have a different link system, but like, can you get to, do you think about like, does it stop at a grocery store, near a grocery store, near UWT campus, near like, or is it based on something else? And what is that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the board selects the ultimate alignment, but a lot of information goes into that. I am a giant transit nerd, but even I, and this seems to be a room full of transit and land use nerds as well. But even I don't ride the train for the sake of riding the train. I ride the train for the sake of going somewhere. Whether that's to visit friends, to visit family, to go somewhere. Ultimately, there's a reason why the train is there, and that's to connect people. You know, and that's ultimately what we are trying to do, and what the agency strives to do, for better or for worse. And so the connection that you mentioned to a grocery store, to the basic needs of the passenger of the community, that's at the heart of what we're trying to do. You know, again, I'm going to keep bringing up Federal Way, because that's what the projects that that's the project that I work on the most. But, you know, the project opened, the Federal Way Link extension opened the first week of December. I can now go from my house in Seattle to downtown Federal Way from one bus and one train. And that's something that I could not do 2.5 months ago. And so there's this phenomenal Cambodian restaurant right off the Federal Way downtown station in the Center Plaza that I love going to, and also the Performing Arts and Event Center in Federal Way that I can now go to by train and bus, which is which is an opportunity that was not available before the train was open. And I think it's those opportunities about connecting things to whether that's a grocery store to Highline College, which is right, across the street from Kent Des Moines Station, and to everything else along the system. That's the heart of what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It's not
Right.
perfect, but it really is, the goal.
If you guys have questions, make sure you're writing them down. We're going to get to them in a couple minutes.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So this just occurred to me. I didn't come planned to ask this. Okay. So I just stated around 60% of Pierce County residents travel outside of Pierce County.
Sure.
So when it comes to employment, how much is leveraged on what future plans? Like for the city of Tacoma, are we bringing in enough employers downtown for people to need the transit in the downtown area so that they're getting to work instead of needing to take 2 or 3 different modes of transportation outside of Pierce County? You can't answer that?
Did you see my face?
Yeah.
I don't have the specific answer to that.
Give it a whirl.
But Tacoma has done the legwork of I'm gonna say the comp plan word. You've updated your comp plan.
Yes.
You have a vision for where the growth is targeted within the city. You just adopted the Tide Flat sub-area plan, a few months, very recently.
Yeah.
And so you have an idea of where people and the things that make a community are envisioned to be. And all of that gets factored in to the decision that the board makes ultimately.
Can I ask a follow-up question and then maybe help you answer this one? Because she gave that to you, and really, I'm so glad it didn't come to me.
you. You would have taken it.
So one of the things I used to chair the Economic Development Board or committee for the city of Tacoma. And one of the things that we would think about is jobs, all the time jobs. But why jobs? Why do we need high paying jobs? Because everybody is leaving the city of Tacoma to go work elsewhere. And that means all of the money that they take with them all day is spent elsewhere. That means that our small businesses are not getting what they need, which in end means that we don't get the local taxes that we need here to provide all of the things that we need. And environmentally, it doesn't work if we want to have the neighborhoods that we want to have. So that's how jobs ties into this walkable neighborhood, the transit. One of the questions that I had, we haven't solved that, by the way. That's that's even a bigger thing of pulling people together and figuring out why do we need good jobs and how do we get them here. A question that I have that I think I know the answer to, but I'm not really sure, is the process of is there bets that we make when creating transit that if we build it, they will come? Or are we following where neighborhoods are being built? And is there a balance? And what maybe can we do better to build it when they come, right? If it's grocery stores, that's a huge problem that I see that we haven't quite figured out how to solve. But I think that there's some work that we can do to better that, if that is the kind of the model that or the value that we kind of bring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have the direct answer to that. I wish I did. But I think the best answer I can say is to get a feel for what the system can offer is to just ride the system. Tacoma is Tacoma. Bellevue is Bellevue, and every station is different. There's so many different things that each station area can offer, and it's that way for a multitude of reasons. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from the places that the stations are in, what's happened since the stations have opened, what hasn't happened also is a big one since the stations that opened, and how can we apply that to where the system is expected to go. And I think that's what we can do, collaborate. We can collaborate on that and be intentional about that, and hopefully good things will come.
I think that is one of over the 10 years that I've been hosting these conversations, I think that's the one thing that keeps coming. It's all driven by density. The more people there are, storefront shops do well when there's lots of people walking on the streets. grocery stores stay where people are using them, and where, you know, if and when we create these communities where everything's far apart and people start relying on like Instacart and stuff like that rather than going in stores, then the store's like, well, you don't need me here. I can be farther away. If you're just going to Instacart it anyways. And then the people who actually want to go to the grocery store, they don't, like what happened on 72nd. And then there's people who are like, you know, Tanisha, who do we talk to at the city to get the grocery store back? And I was like, I wish I could tell you a person at the city who could make a grocery store come back. Like, that's just not the way that works, right? So I think it is kind of what you were saying of like, there is a, if we build it, they will come aspect to it. And there is a, let's not build let's be thoughtful about what we're building, because we could be inadvertently, you know, destroying something else. And so, and I think if you look like, you know, my daughter lives in Columbia City, and it's like, they have really cool grocery stores in the bottoms of all of these buildings, right? Some of them are high end, some of them are just regular grocery stores. But I think about like when we went to Brazil, there was like little stores everywhere, but there's also hundreds of people walking the streets. And so a grocery store that has fresh fruits and vegetables can last because there's 100 people walking past there that can pick up, you know, this fruit or whatever on their way home. So we have to, because we've had this conversation with Pierce Transit as well, like people have to be using the system for the system to be able to do the things they want to do, right? If nobody's riding the bus, it's hard for the bus to have stops that go every 5, 10, 15 minutes. But if people are not riding the bus because the stops aren't every 5, 10, 15 minutes, right? So there's like this chicken egg thing that as a community, we have to start to figure out if we want the results that make all of this work worth it. Okay, I'm gonna get into questions. So this question is interesting and also talks about environmental justice. So how do we prevent transit-oriented development becoming like only allowing dense housing near large polluting motorways? Because it runs right across, then you build these, you know, that's where the affordable housing is, and we kind of are redoing what we've already done, where you have low-income communities of color being adjacent to highways and places with lots of motors. So I don't know who wants to take that one.
I could just say, as someone who's been thinking about how to build more affordable housing and working with the state, who is trying to do all of what they can, and cities who are governments are trying to do all of what they can. And a lot of times what you said is we offer up surplus land. That's the easiest way we can, is just make the land free. Well, what do we have of land? We have land that is unusable for anything else. It's not in the best places, right? But that's what we have to give. And so I think that I don't think it's intentional. I think it's like we start thinking about all the tools that we have to work with, and how do we acquire better sites if we want to do something different, right? So if we want better sites, we've got to be really intentional. We've got to put a lot of money into land banking rather than, you know, figuring out just like kind of the scraps that come after. That's one of the big ways I think we can do as state and government entities, but that means we got to take money away from something else. And is that okay that we're in the market speculating on the best price, the best neighborhood? So
observation, sometimes you'll have people, they know that it's not the healthiest place to live in, and so they will opt to move further away where it smells better outside. You know, the grass is actually growing, and so that's part of the gentrification that you see. People are moving because they want to have fresh air. And there's a considerable difference. And this is one of the weird things as a real estate person I noticed. Like if I go to Edgewood, I can smell the dandelions, and it's weird. Or the jasmines or whatever's out there. And it smells so different, and people feel more comfortable out in different areas where it's less polluted. And so that is a reason why people leave.
And dandelions are delightful. I love dandelions as well, as does my daughter. I would say from Sound Transit perspective, or from the RTUD program's perspective, you know, we are putting affordable housing everywhere, all throughout the system. And like I mentioned, the 14 stations, you know, we have 4 projects right now that are under construction. One on the east side, two on the east side, one in Redmond, one in Bellevue. Those properties are not off of an arterial. They are very, very nice properties on the east side. And those are going to be serving populations that most likely would not be able to afford living in that area had it not been for these affordable housing projects. And so I think we're going to try to keep doing what we're doing as long as we have the support and the partnerships that allow it to happen.
Yeah. So what are some cities that are doing transit-oriented development well, and what can we learn from them, or what have we learned from them already?
I can go first.
Yep, go ahead.
I think we have some good examples. You know, if anyone follows the Sound Transit Reddit thread, there's a lot of poo-pooing that goes on. However, I think we do have some good examples. Capitol Hill is a good one over there. And I think it's interesting, again, I keep highlighting the need to ride the system because that's the system that we have and that's the system that we're going to have for a very long time. And so, you know, I would love to be able to continue to improve the system that I live and work with on a day-to-day basis. So Capitol Hill, I think, is a really good one. There's different examples of different stages of TOD all throughout, you know, the system. If you were to go outside of the region, Vancouver, I think, has a very good transit-oriented development program. LA in Southern California has a big program as well. Boston, and then anywhere in Europe where their cities and urban areas were built pre-car.
Yeah. I think that's how for me, that's kind of how I know, like when you go certain places and you don't have to rent a car and you can get all around and you don't have to have a PhD to like figure out the system. I'm still afraid of New York's system, but like DC, I can just like hop on and go everywhere. I'm not worried about getting lost. I'm not worried about being unsafe. And like, I think that's like, there's so much cool stuff in this region. And there's people who are like, oh my gosh, Seattle's so far away. And I'm like, okay, you've not traveled a lot because that's not really that far. I mean, in Atlanta, that's just Atlanta. You're still in Atlanta. You know what I mean? Like, you know, if you're in Houston, you're still in Houston when you get to, you know, Seattle, the distance from us to Seattle. But those places have ways to move people around that are, well, traffic's terrible in Atlanta, so if you could ride the train, that's better than being stuck on the freeway. Same with Houston. So it's like, I think we have all these really cool things that people don't get to access because we have one highway that goes north and south. And so do you want to sit on that one highway depending on what's happening in any given day? So, okay, I'm going to go to another question. I think this relates to seniors too, so I'm going to add seniors in here. But how does TOD support more accessible ADA housing? And I think that's also true for seniors who are aging and want to be able to still get around. What are some things that they can do?
I think policy is like the first and easiest step is like, what do we require? How many parking spaces do we require? And this is where we try to balance all of the things, right? Because when you want more density, the first thing you do is remove the parking requirements because that means it's going to be, everybody's going to take the train or the link anyway. So, right, we don't really need all of that parking, but then you don't think about who uses parking, and sometimes seniors and folks that are on wheels get forgotten about. And so balancing those parking requirements is one thing. The second thing, and I hit on it before, was talking about we can make policies all we want to, but how are we funding those policies and how are we talking to the community that's going to be building those things to make sure that our policies are penciling, right? So when we require curb cuts, so a lot of times if you're doing a development, you're required to build the entire infrastructure, not just for your development, but for the development across the street. So a person in your building can accessibly get to one side of the street to the other to get to everywhere they need to go. Fantastic. that sometimes is in conflict with creating the units financially. So how do we create the funds for the things that we want to see? The policy isn't the issue. We shouldn't just not want accessible things because they are hard to do. We should think about what we want, and then we got to think about how we pay for them. And that's the harder part to do, which is why things don't get built sometimes.
Can I just add that it also costs more money? So if you're making a wider doorway, there's more materials being used, and the builder has to take that into consideration when they're making the decisions on what to actually put in that location.
So last question. How are small businesses incentivized to occupy like the ground level spaces? How do we use transit oriented to like kind of cultivate small businesses and like small local businesses? Because I think that's what gives places flavor. Like when you go certain cities, Portland is really good at it. Like there's not a lot of franchise things. It's like very weird, quirky Portland things. And some people love them. I prefer not to have pepper in my ice cream, but everybody's got their own, things. But like, what are how do we incentivize that so that we keep the flavor of a place like Tacoma, but also like are growing our own? So like, what are some of the things either policy wise or through the TOD project that allows that to happen?
I think Kiara's answer to the previous question applies to this as well. It's an understanding of who do you want to serve, what will it take to build the space for them, to set them up for success, and then what will it take to continue that success once the business is open. And I think I mentioned previously, it's difficult, and it's something that we continue to work on, and that we want to get better at.
I guess I would just add one thing that I don't think we think about a lot, or one thing that I see missing from the conversation is how are we, what I see in Tacoma sometimes is not a lack of innovators, a lack of young people who have been inspired to start businesses and to become entrepreneurs. And it's not because they are not innovators, it's because I believe that they don't have the tools or the access that is like something that they can do. Kind of we build a lot of things, like we build a lot of teachers, we build a lot of different people to work in different things. And I don't see that we are really building entrepreneurs from like kindergarten to fill some of these spaces. So a lot of times we have to have a person that goes to do work to go to Seattle or go to Oregon or go to Vancouver to get really cool businesses and bring them here. And we do a lot of work at the city of Tacoma to try to create, at the City of Tacoma Chamber of Commerce, to try to create destination-based businesses is one of the names that they're called, where people are. And that's one of the things, destination-based businesses help people stay in a neighborhood, and they attract teachers and they attract the other things. And I think that entertainment in general is one of the things, entertainment and innovators are two of the things that we don't talk about when we talk about our economy enough, and how we make things more affordable and just in part of the environment and just transit conversation, period.
Yeah, totally agree. All right. Well, that went really fast, and I have like 3 more questions, but I'll just email all of you. I'll let you guys know what they say. And I just want to thank everyone for being with us today. And I hope to see you next month for our last Friday Forum of the season. And with that, I'll pass it over to Laura.
Awesome. Let's give a round of applause for our panel. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for all your questions and being part of this conversation. Our last Friday Forum of 2026 actually won't be in March. It'll be April 3rd. And that will be a conversation with new Tacoma Mayor Anders Ibsen and Pierce County Executive Ryan Mello. Excited about that. And I encourage you all to join us as well on April 27th, also in this space for a town hall, again with Pierce County Executive Ryan Mello and City of Tacoma Council Member Christina Walker about sound transit. So that'll be awesome. Then we have some info in the back, and on Zoom, you got info in the chat. A recording of this forum will be available on Monday in case you want to share with all your friends and be the coolest kid in town. And otherwise, we thank you for coming and joining us and being part of these conversations. Thanks, everybody.